There are some key ideas that is very important for your upcoming quiz assessment. This brief introduction can help you to answer the questions in quizzes correctly. So, as I have already introduced to you this metaphysics, the discipline, and how philosophers discuss metaphysical ideas. As you know, the word metaphysics was coined by Andronicus of Rhodes. He was an editor for the collected works of Aristotle, based after physics. Aristotle himself doesn't use the word metaphysics. It was Andronicus who coined the word. Hence, the word metaphysics comes to us from the combination of Greek words, ta meta, ta physica. The after the physicals, or it can be also read as the ones after the physical ones. Thus, the combination means over and beyond physics. With time, metaphysics came to mean that department of philosophy which deals with features of beings that are hyperphysical, supersensible, and immaterial. For that reason, metaphysics is referred to as a branch of philosophy that studies being and is concerned with the ultimate nature of reality. In modern times, metaphysics is studied as a heterogeneous discipline comprising a wide variety of philosophical questions and methods for answering them. As I have already told you, metaphysics is one of the widest areas of knowledge. It has many sub-branches. One of the important branches of metaphysics is cosmogony. It's the study of creation. Cosmogony deals with very important questions like, is the world created? How the world is created? Why was the world created? Why was it created, and who created this world? And what is the purpose in creation? These are the questions that can be addressed and explored in cosmogony. Another area of metaphysical inquiry is cosmology. The main problems of cosmology are, is the world one or many? Or is the world both one or many? Then we study ontology. That is another important branch, one of the very important branches of metaphysical inquiries that studies concepts such as existence, being, becoming, and reality. It includes the questions of how entities are grouped into basic categories and which of these entities exist on the most fundamental level. It also discusses the nature of ultimate reality. It poses the following questions. Is reality one or many? Or is it both one or many? If reality is many, what is the relationship between many elements? These are the questions that can be addressed and explored in ontology. Philosophy of self is another area of metaphysical knowledge and truth. This is mainly concerned with the philosophical analysis of the self. It asks what is self and scrutinizes the dichotomy of soul and body. It also appraises how soul and body are related. It asks many more questions like, is soul free or dependent on human body? Is soul one or many? All are the problems of the philosophy of self. And finally, we have eschatology. That's another sub-branch of metaphysics. In this area, the discussion of the condition of the soul after death the nature of the other world, and so on, form the subject matter of this branch of philosophy. And in philosophy, in metaphysics, generally philosophers engage themselves with inquiring the nature of being. The problem of being is one of the oldest philosophical problems, and it was introduced by Parmenides. Parmenides is one of the ancient Greek philosophers. He is also known as the founder of Eleatic school. Before Parmenides, Heraclitus appears in the history of philosophy with a new philosophical problem. The problem was problem of change. During that time, in ancient times, we have like pre-Socratic philosophers have been divided into two different schools, Ionic school and Eleatic school. In between Ionic and Eleatic school, the philosopher Heraclitus appeared, and he introduced the problem of change. In his doctrine, change is reality, change is real, and everything in the world is changing. So he emphatically declared that everything is constant flux, everything is changing. So nothing in Heraclitus' philosophy is at rest, nothing is stable. In contrast to Heraclitus' philosophy of change, Parmenides offered his philosophy of being. His philosophy emphasizes being and characterized being by an opposition between being and becoming. So being in Parmenides' philosophy is something real that does not compass any change, and that being in Parmenides' view is stable and it's unity. It neither arises nor perishes. In this sense, Parmenides' doctrine of being is central and eternal. So this is how the problem of being emerged in ancient Greek tradition. Then the Plato's philosophy also reflects in his philosophy. It's believed that Plato is the first in the West to have explicitly raised the question, what is being? In his philosophy, we study a form or idea has been characterized as beings. So this is how philosophers from a different ages have interpreted the central concept of metaphysical concept of being and essence as well. Essence is equally important metaphysical problem that attracted philosophers from centuries. Though Plato has engaged himself with idealistic, universal philosophical problems, and his idea of being, in terms of forms or ideas, has been explored in different, deliberations. In contrast to Plato, Aristotle upholds that individual existence is the paragon of reality and calls it primary substance. So you can see the contrast, the disagreement between philosophers from the beginning. So Aristotle believes that primary substance. In his philosophy, Aristotle uses this substance to mean all sorts of subject and subject matter, we can see. So in Aristotle's philosophy, or we can say in Aristotle's metaphysics, form and matter is a very important idea, a very important explanation of the world. So form and matter as being has been taken or interpreted in Aristotle's philosophical inquiry. Then other philosopher we have in medieval age, St. Thomas Aquinas, he also addressed the problems concerning being, and he introduced two denotations of being pure and simple, and qualified being. So this is how we identify metaphysical, engagement between philosophers from time to time, from ancient philosophers up to medieval. Then we reached a modern philosophy. René Descartes himself tries to give philosophy a fresh beginning, refuses to engage in a systematic ontology. But still, his cogito, his doctrine cogito, contains certain assumptions about existence. Being is the first one's existence, discovered with intuitive certainty in the performance of thinking. As you know, Descartes was one of the father of rationalistic philosophy. His philosophy also reflected the problems of being, because in his method of his methodic, the doubting method, his method of inquiry, he reached at something certain that is beyond doubt. So that the discovered reality is being behind his intuitive performance of thinking. So it's also reflected in his view that being is what can be grasped, and existent can be perceived through inner or outer sense. In Descartes' philosophy also, we observe that problem of being and essence appeared. So this is how Descartes also engaged with this problem. And in his view, being is what can be grasped, and existent can be perceived through inner or outer sense. As for essence, it's the possibility of what one proposes. It's eternal because it's pure possibility. And then the place of traditional ontology is taken up by the transcendental analectic, which replaces being and beings with the pure ideas of reason as the spontaneous conditions of possibility of experience. However, in spatial context of the ontological proof of the existence of God, the concept of being does play a central role. You can see that rationalistic and empiricistic trends. Some of the empiricists deny metaphysics, and in transcendental analectic, we can see Kant is trying to synthesize rationalism and empiricism. And in Kant's synthesis, we observe that there are some metaphysical realities, some metaphysical entities that Kant himself, from empirical standpoint, rejected. But on the other hand, he depicted that there are entities, and he has acknowledged that the existence of God, the concept of self, and so on, play a central role in this inquiry. So Kant's approach to this problem is peculiar in the sense, on the one hand, he rejected some metaphysical entities from empirical standpoint. On the other hand, he acknowledges metaphysical entities like God, self, and freedom, etc. Though this is how philosophers approach this metaphysics or metaphysical trends, metaphysical entities. Thus, being is differently approached, we can say, in the history of philosophy. The problem of being and essence has been differently approached by different philosophers. If we look into the philosophy of Hegel, he is also understood as a universal doctrine of Hegel's philosophy. We are more often that his philosophy is more often the philosophy of the doctrine of being. His philosophy is the explication of the meaning of is. However, the primordial reality is the absolute idea, the Geist. In his philosophy, absolute idea also depicts this metaphysical, this metaphysical approach, Hegel's metaphysical approach to ultimate reality. But you can see the contrast between these modern and contemporary or 19th and 20th century philosophers. As I have already told you, there were a disagreement and reaction between philosophers. There are disagreement of you can see here between Soren Kierkegaard and Hegel. Hegel has emphasized objective, idealistic, or metaphysical trends, ideas, abstract and universal truths, while as you can see, Kierkegaard reacted against the absence of a place of the individual and the particular existence in Hegel's dialectic. So Kierkegaard observes there is something we call lake. That is, existence has that we can say that from Kierkegaardian point, existence has different meanings for him. It means the manner of being proper to a human being. So in Kierkegaard's philosophy, being is differently approached. His idea of being is central concern central concern of his thought, and his central concern emphasizes human being. So being in Kierkegaardian philosophy is a human existence. Existential trend, we have seen existential philosophers are trying to emphasize existence instead of some pre-given clusters, or we can say essences. So philosophers from the beginning were engaged with themselves with the problem of being and essence. But in existential trend, existential philosophy, the old philosophical conflict between essence and existence that has been emerged from Plato to Aristotle, and the climax has reached to Hegel, or we can say in other idealistic philosophers. But existential philosophers, particularly Jean-Paul Sartre, has turned the dictum that has been emphasized in old philosophical traditions like essence precedes existence. In some cases, we have seen some phenomenologists like Husserl also believes in the doctrine. But existential philosophers like Kierkegaard, Sartre are vehemently opposed to this view. They are trying to emphasize existence, and their idea of existence, their idea of being is idea of existence, human existence. So this is what have been revealed in the philosophy of Soren Kierkegaard. His being, human being, has taken the place of being that has been taken as a central concept in metaphysical inquiry. And Heidegger was one of the Husserl's most brilliant pupils. His originality consists in adopting the phenomenology of Husserl and applying it, not to the rarefied world of pure essences, rather lived world in all its temporality and concreteness. So Heidegger's whole philosophy can be understood as a concern with the question of being. As I have already made it clear that existential philosophers are more interested in human existence. So being in Heidegger's philosophy is characterized as Dasein. He has written a huge monograph on being and time and tries to explicate the meaning of being by examining a particular being. So Dasein is human reality. Here again, we have seen Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the towering figure of existential philosophy, also explores the idea of being as human beings, and his ontology. He emphatically explained that his ontology is not the ontology of any higher being. Rather, his ontology is the ontology of human reality. So existential philosophers deals with the problem of being differently than that of earlier philosophers. Existential philosophers emphasize existence instead of pre-given essences, in other words. So Sartre's ontology explicates the human condition as well, with an emphasis on the consideration of existence with others and with special attention to the human body. He has addressed a lot of things and tried to resolve some old philosophical controversies. by bringing old philosophical controversies into fresh philosophical practice. So in Sartre's philosophy also we can see being is differently taken as his central concern of human existence has occupied this whole debate. So existential philosophers emphasized human existence, and this whole debate has reached to this central point that existence is central and it should be the forefront of philosophical concern. Uh, I thank you for listening me, and now it's open for discussion.